Hello. I'm just going to jump to the highlights today straight away. So here I'm going to switch the screen and start for the day. Oh, it's a long one. The first one itself is a long one. Okay, it's from Get It Done. After completing the study, as everyone approached the sign out desk, they faced a choice between two pens to sign the name. A regular pen and a laser pen identical to the other one, to the one half of them, to the one half of them had tested before. Those who had tested the laser pointing function did not select the laser pen when signing their name. They instead chose the regular pen. In contrast, those who didn't test the laser function were equally likely to choose the laser pen as the regular pen. They made the selection at random. This study explains why multipurpose items often end up serving no purpose at all. We'd rather a pen just be a pen. This was an experiment where they measured, do people prefer items which serve multiple purposes. For example, a pen which has a laser pointing function. So it's both, pen and it's a pen as well, as well as that pointer, that laser pointer you have. And in this experiment, I forget the experiment, the course of the experiment, but apparently half of them gets to examine that laser pointing function in the pen. But when they're in the course of experiment, they use it because they're asked to. But when they are exiting, after the experiment, after the fact, when they are asked to just use it for a regular day-to-day activity, they now prefer the regular pen. And yeah, the idea is that uh, items that serve multiple purposes sound fancy, but people just prefer that, people prefer to use items that just do one thing and do that thing well. It has to be designed for that thing. So yeah, it's an insight into, again, our motivations. What we prefer to do, what we prefer to avoid. It's that insight into our motivation, that if you want to get something done, within yourself, if you're trying to look into yourself and see what motivates you to do something, aim for things that do that one thing well, and try to adopt them, really. There were more insights around here, but again, I'm not really sure right now. I'm just going to move ahead. Kill it with fire. It's the minor adjustments to systems that have not been actively developed in a while that create the impression that failure is inevitable and push otherwise rational engineers towards doing rewrites when rewrites are not necessary. So yeah, this book is, it's a great book, but it often has sentences which are kind of confusing. If you read them independently. So this particular section, it's talking about incremental rewrite of a software, or not even a rewrite, incremental maintenance of a software. If a software is being maintained actively, you're modernizing the different structures that make up a system. If you're modernizing them actively, you'd not be inclined to do a rewrite, because there is a relation with the uh, with how you perceive complexity in the system. And we already know that things that are not familiar to us, we think that they're complex. And how do you build familiarity? If you touch that piece of code again and again, you get more and more familiar with it. And how do you touch that piece of code? If you have to maintain it again and again incrementally, that's how you get familiar with it. So this is how the chain works out. If you're not going to maintain it regularly, you're not going to touch the code. And if you're not touching the code, you're not getting familiar with it, and then it will appear complex, and you will always have that bias towards it, that you will build up a bias that this piece of code is complex, and it's better to rewrite it rather than work with it. So and like the highlight says, it creates an impression that failure is inevitable because it is very complex. In our minds, the piece of code is very, very complex, and failure is inevitable. So we would be pushing ourselves to do a rewrite. Engineers, I'm looking at myself as an engineer over here. So otherwise, rational engineers who can actually look at the system and then analyze it with a pair of fresh eyes. But this impression has been created, this bias has been created. We are all affected by bias, right? There's nothing new over there, and we are pushed towards rewrites when rewrites are not even necessary. So let's move ahead. As a man thinketh. Aim high and dream big, for as you dream, you will become. Your life will expand to fill the contours of your vision. I don't really think I should add anything to this. It's fairly self evident. I'll move on. Again, kill it with fire. The first mistake software engineers make with legacy modernization is assuming technical advancement is linear. With that frame of mind, anything built in older design patterns or with an older architectural philosophy is inferior to newer options. Again, it's like the highlight is evident, but I'll talk about the contrasting aspect, as in like what is technical advancement if not linear? So yeah, we think that technical advancement is linear. You have, for example, you had jQuery, and now you have React, and now after that you have Svelte, or what's that thing today? Quick. Right now Quick is the popular thing, and we think the technical advancement is linear, but we see again and again that it is not. Like history repeats itself, the technical advancement also repeats itself. Concepts that were that were used decades ago, they come back in fashion in a slightly different way. It appears modern, but it comes back in a slightly different way, and that appears to be the new thing. The book goes into the example of cloud computing. So how cloud computing is essentially shared computing, and that is what was the practice before. Shared computing, you would have large mainframes and you would get a slice of time on that mainframe. It was essentially that, and then okay, things moved towards when computers became uh, cheaper to obtain and cheaper to provision. Okay, you would have dedicated computing instances, and that's how the technology trend went until it we went back to VPSs and now towards cloud computing. It's essentially, we are in a loop. Yeah, it is a different aspect. It's different. It's not, the cloud computing today is not the same as mainframe computing before. It's not. But the concepts are similar. But if you're going to assume that technology advancement is linear, that it is moving ahead, you'll always get this impression that newer options are better because it's new, and we always have this bias of, again, adopting new things. So we assume that it's better and we just move on. But if we realize that it's a cyclical thing, we would not be rushing ourselves to do that, because we know that we build an understanding that all of this software implementation, this engineering, it's relative. It is, sorry, not relative. It's contextual. So again, it depends on the requirements, and it depends on what is necessary, what are the constraints of the system, and then you adopt the technology that you need to build something, right? And that comes with greater understanding. Commonly said that senior engineers, staff engineers, that's when they start asking these questions. So yeah, that's really what it is. So this cloud computing example is what was mentioned in the book. What I thought of is, how the JavaScript world, it's kind of discovering that everything is same as PHP. We are kind of moving towards the same paradigm that PHP has been working on since years, decades even. And again, it just goes to show that like all technology progress is cyclical. We thought, okay, we are getting ahead with we are getting ahead with all of this JavaScript frameworks, starting with Angular, then React, and all the whole diverse set of frameworks that we had. But now we are moving towards concepts that were kind of introduced with PHP, and languages of that time. The request response model that's typical in PHP and so on. So yes, yeah, that's what this highlight says, and I think it's a very, very insightful takeaway that technology growth is not linear. Again, kill it with fire. Okay. Overall, interfaces and ideas spread through networks of people, not based on merit of success. Exposure to a given configuration creates the perception that it's easier and more intuitive, causing it to be passed down to more generations of technology. Again, it's talking about how technologies win, basically. So you may have an excellent piece of technology, but if it never catches on, if it if it does not spread through through word of mouth or through some networks of people, it's not going to catch on. So, for example, I work with Drupal, It's often said of Drupal that it's, yeah, the code base is strong, it's well written and all of that. Again, it's all contextual, but it is considered by many to be well written. So all that is there, but the strength of Drupal lies in its community. You can rebuild Drupal in, maybe, like, for example, in a more performant language like Go or even Rust. And many people have suggested that, okay, we should rewrite Drupal in Go, for example, or Node, JavaScript essentially. So all of these things are there, but the point is that it's not the technology itself, based on its merit, that has won something. What has happened is, or what is important is the people who are using the technology. In Drupal's context, it's said many times, it's come for the code, stay for the community. It's really the people that matter. It's really how you're using Drupal to help people that matters, not Drupal as a code base. Yeah, Drupal as a code base is great and everything that's there, but that's not the important thing. It's not the only thing. It's not even the important thing, because, like this highlight says, that technologies, the interfaces and ideas, they spread through networks of people. It's not the merits of technology. So it's sometimes, being in the right place at the right time, or it's really about the interactions that, or the social capital that people have built, that allows the technology to spread. You can build the best possible piece of software, and you can keep pushing people, but if those people don't accept it and they're not going to adopt it on more on, that piece of software is just going to stay with you. It's not going to do any good in the society, and that's what matters really, the value add that the software adds to the people who are using it. Otherwise, it's just a piece of code. Moving on. A mind for numbers. One of the most cited papers in sociology, The Strength of Weak Ties, by sociologist Mark Granovetter, describes how the number of acquaintances you have, not the number of good friends, predicts your access to the latest ideas as well as your success on the job market. Okay. Um, I don't really have anything else to add to this. I think it's fairly clear. So, moving on, drive. Keep in mind one ginormous caveat. Repeated now that bonuses can quickly become expected if then entitlements, which can ultimately create an effective performance. Okay, so the book is making a point that, if you're having this incentives where, you're giving out bonuses or incentives if people do something, like, for example, if I don't, let's take a silly example, that if people like your post, you're giving them an incentive. So that is the if then entitlement. That is okay. No, yeah, it's very simple. I'm liking a post and I'm getting something out of it. Okay, so that essentially the book makes a case that, of course, that doesn't help. The minute you remove the incentive, the people who are actually going to like your post previously, even they are demotivated by it now once you remove the incentive. So the incentives have this weird effect on people. It's kind of what they would otherwise do. It removes that motivation, that intrinsic motivation. If then entitlements, they create that problem. So the book repeatedly makes a case that, we should avoid if then entitlements or if then incentives at all costs. What you could instead have is now that okay, oh, now that is done, like, here's a bonus or here's an incentive, and like the key to that is that it should be random. It should not be all. It should not become like a regular thing. That is, if it becomes, like the highlight says, if it becomes a regular thing, if it's like a repeated now that bonuses, then our mind will immediately catch on. It'll notice the pattern that, okay, yeah, it was not said that I would get incentives for liking that post, but whenever I like the post, I'm getting the bonus. So our mind kind of translates that into if then bonus anyway, and then again we get into the same problems associated with if then entitlements. So the key is that, if you're creating incentives, you have to be very, very careful that it has to be random. It has to be um, uh, I don't know how to describe this. What's the best word for this? But it has to have some sort of judgment behind it. It's not like a simple mechanical inference that, okay, yeah, oh, this is done. Let's give out an entitlement. Let's give out an incentive, but or let's give out a bonus. It has to be essentially random. It has to be okay once in a while, kind of thing. And yeah, that's what this is. Moving on, I think today's video is getting quite long, but let's move on. The molecule of more. You might get a few weeks of dopaminergic thrills by buying an expensive Swiss timepiece, but after that, it's just a watch. Getting promoted to district manager makes going to work exciting at first, but eventually it becomes the same old grind. Creativity is different because it stirs together HNN with dopamine. HNN is here and now chemicals. I think oxytocin and few other chemicals. I'm forgetting which. It's like mixing a little bit of carbon with iron to make steel. Okay. The highlight is essentially saying that dopaminergic activities, they feel great in the moment, but then they what's the word? They crater. They kind of fall down, and then they're not that effective anymore. So creativity is different because it mixes both HNN and dopamine. This section is about talking about creativity. The feeling that you get when you are actually creating something, and then you're seeing that in the present, that that this is something that you created, not something that you just obtained because it was out of reach for you, like an expensive Swiss timepiece. It's not that every day that you would buy one expensive timepiece. For many people, it's not even it's not even once in a lifetime that you would buy something like that. So yeah, it is kind of out of reach, and once you buy it, you get that dopaminergic thrill, but then it's gone. Sometimes even moments after you get it, it's gone. Creativity is different. Moving on, Anthro-Vision. We can all embrace some of the principles of ethnography: to look around, watch, listen, ask open-ended questions, be curious like a child, and try to walk in someone else's shoes, to cite the proverb. It is valuable even if you're a politician, leader, corporate executive, lawyer, techie, or any other variant of the 21st century principle professional world. Okay, I think that's the highlight. And again, it's very self-evident. I don't really have much to add. Ethnography is again like the principles of anthropology, that how are you going to look at the world? There is the saying in the book, making the familiar strange, and sorry, making the strange familiar, and familiar strange. That is, all sciences, they aim towards making the strange familiar. That is, if you don't know something, it's strange to you, you understand it better and make it familiar to yourself. But the other way as also, look at it from the aspect that you're looking at it at the first, you're looking at it for the first time. Anyway, I think that's pretty self-evident. I'll not go too deep into this. At your best, if you don't declare a finish line to your work, your body will. Again, I don't need to add. I think it's pretty much evident and impactful. So I'll just leave it at that. That brings us to the end of our highlights today. It was one of the longer ones, so but I think it was good discussion, especially the discussion that we had on "Kill It with Fire," on that quote about technology advancement. So yeah, see you tomorrow. Have a good day.